Welcome to the Executive Coaching Podcast, where Executive Coach Alicia Cowan will discuss leadership topics and coaching solutions to tackle the most difficult problems that keep you from leading your team to success.
Hey leaders, welcome. Episode 92 of the Executive Coaching Podcast. All right, friends, if you've been with me for a while, you know I love to give you a quick update about what's happened around the Cowan House. I'm going to make a tie into the executive coaching space, don't you worry. We are officially in the home stretch of the school year over here at the Cowan House. So it's transitioning from spring season into summer in the next few days. And it's this end of year chaos feeling of fun stuff in a good way. So, eighth grade graduation's happening next week. I'm officially going to have 2 high schoolers. We have a big pool party that is going to bookend this end of year celebration. And we've just got transitions. We have a daughter that is applying to transfer for law school, and so she'll be making a big move. And we don't know where to at the end of the summer. So it's all of this transition that's happening as we exit one season and enter another. And we're along with our kids on the ride, as well as we have just adulting transitions. And so it makes me reflect. And I've been thinking about identity shifts that we have in our lives. So here's the tie. You think about entering the workforce and being an individual contributor, becoming a manager, becoming an executive, and then maybe entering different phases of your life, parenting, maybe caretaking, different seasons that we have to include seasons of our career and leadership. And both of those things are typically happening simultaneously for us. And so with me thinking about this transition of my kids and the seasons they're in, as well as my own, it honestly all feels like a big identity shift and leadership transition for all of us. So that's what I want to talk about this week, is we're going to talk about executive presence and the identities that you need to have as a leader, like your leadership identity, and why you have to let your old self, your prior existing self, go in a way. So I do want to start off. I want to give a couple of client wins out here too before we jump into things, because I think some of these are tied to identity expansion as well. So some client wins that I've had this week is I had a client that recently just had her second baby, a healthy baby boy, and just won a massive industry award. And she got recently honored at a dinner to receive that award. And so massive kudos for the season of life that she is in. I also had another client that recently exited a really high-level role right after an acquisition. She had a really successful transition, but wanted to take a pause and reevaluate her goals and her career next step. And so she recently just accepted another executive offer through networking, within days of exiting her previous role. So not exactly as she had planned, but she was smart and gave herself a big old break to be able to transition into that new role. And I'm so thrilled and excited for her. It's a great fit for her and opportunity. And then I also just had a client that we went through and successfully negotiated a C-suite title. And it wasn't what this person was expecting going into the role, but has now actually performed their way into the C-suite title. And it's just been thrilling and fun to watch. And then I also have multiple clients that are talking about their next role and being discussed in some major succession planning conversations with their leaders, and they're starting to level up into larger leadership roles. And it's just been so fun to be by their side and watch this identity shift for these leaders. So big congrats to clients. And one thing all these clients had in common is that at some point, they all had to become the version of themselves capable of holding that level. So kudos to them. And I also have an invitation at the start of this. If you are in this season of work and wanting to level up and take on this new leadership identity at the next level, please don't hesitate to reach out and talk through what becoming a client might look like. And we would talk through what those goals are and what you have. Always available. You can reach out to me on my website. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Let's talk about executive presence. And this might sound a little ominous, but the death of your previous self. And so, yes, it sounds a little dramatic, but this is actually one of the most important leadership conversations that I believe we can have. Here's my core thesis. As you rise into the higher levels of leadership, your skills are not the only thing that need to evolve. Your identity, who you are, who you believe you are, your identity has to evolve with you as well. What do I mean by that? Well, you can't operate as a lower level, junior level you, maybe director, etc. You have to let go of that previous version that you were operating at and then embody maybe that vice president or that C-suite level you, that founder you, maybe the board level you, right? The leadership level changes. And so the identity that you hold internally has got to change with it. There is what I'll call is the identity gap. And so if you've ever heard organizations or teams, departments resist change, and they'll have this mantra of like, this is how we've always done it. And so we want to do it this way because this is what we've always done. The analogy is we do the same thing psychologically on the inner stuff, the inner work. But instead of protecting a company process, we are protecting this old version of ourselves. So that's the difference. I want to make that analogy because I think we've all heard it in the corporate sphere of like, that age-old adage of people that are change resistant. But I want to offer you this opportunity to say, where am I maybe being change resistant? And that I'm not looking at the internal work that I might need to do, because I'm saying to myself, well, this is just me. This is just my personality. This is how I've always been. This is how I've always done it. Take it or leave it. And so I think, again, that there might be an opportunity for us to look at that. Not saying that 100% is you and you have to change, but are you doing the work to take a look at that and making sure the identity is at the level that you're currently wanting to operate at? So let's talk about some real life tangible examples and how this shows up in leaders. So example number one is a leader gets promoted, but they avoid posting the title, the up-leveled title publicly out there in the world because they fear judgment, seeming arrogant, like, who do you think you are? And they're afraid of what old friends, coworkers, or family might think. I've absolutely experienced this with someone that was so afraid to put something out on LinkedIn because they were really afraid of the reaction that they were going to get. And so this leader, they technically had the role, but they mentally hadn't accepted the identity and all that it encompassed, and the discomfort of going through this identity and what others were going to say or not say about them. And a lot of this wasn't even based in reality. It's not as if somebody had said any of this to them, but it was some of the long-held beliefs that they had around what it meant to be a leader and successful at that level. It's a wild thing to think about. So I'm going to give you another example. This is example number 2 of how this could show up in leaders. So I had a newly appointed C-suite leader that was afraid and avoided putting that C-suite level title in their email signature or putting it publicly out there. This person actually wanted like softer language. They actually asked, they're like, is there anything else I could put or a different way I could say this? They wanted something less direct and overt, less visible. Why? Well, visibility creates a sense of vulnerability, right? So owning that leadership level and that identity often requires us tolerating discomfort light years before our confidence can catch up to it. And so a lot of leaders are waiting to feel like the CEO or the C-suite leader before they act like the C-suite leader. But here's the trick. Leadership identity is usually built in the reverse. Okay, let's go deeper. Why does this matter? Why does this matter psychologically? Well, this is where we want to dive into executive presence and tighten this work that we can do. So here's the deal. Executive presence, as I've been talking about ad nauseum, it starts internally. A lot of times we want some validation externally for it to feel like we can accept it and be there. But I'm giving you examples of where I've had real life examples in humans where they've gotten the proof, literally achieved the promotion in title, in pay, but their identity hasn't caught up. So that's what I mean about like this disconnect between executive presence being external and won and achieved versus you're doing the internal work to make sure that you're ready for it when you actually get there. So, what do I mean? Executive presence is not how you speak and speaking slower, wearing better clothes, sounding more polished. All of those things are helpful and they actually might support the perception of you as a leader. But the gig is that true executive presence starts with an internal like self-concept, like who you believe you are. So again, you have to think like an executive to feel it and believe it before you can do those external activities in how you will show up as a leader. So here's some things we can think about. Here's some framework. I've taught the model before. I've learned this from Brooke Castillo, who has been my coach for many, many years. And the framework is this: your thoughts create feelings. Feelings will drive your behaviors, and then your behaviors are ultimately going to create your results that you have in your life. So, where the trick is with executive presence is that deep down, if you believe, I don't belong here, or I'm not ready to be an executive, what are people going to say about me? People are going to think that I've changed, or they're going to say, who do I think that I am? Or I'm going to be exposed in some way. What will happen is you will unconsciously sabotage the very level you're trying to reach. Meaning, if you're thinking you're not ready, you will feel not ready, and then you will take action that will reflect those thoughts and result in you showing and proving that you are not ready. So here's an important point. As human beings, we will always seek identity congruence. What I mean by that is you will subconsciously act in alignment with the version of yourself that you believe you already are. So here's the gig. Your identity, if it's still attached to playing small or at a previous version of yourself, that junior level identity that you have, if your identity is still attached to needing to prove yourself or feeling like you haven't arrived because there's more to do, or you're somehow like feeling like imposter, like the gig is going to be up at any moment, people are going to find you out, or if your identity is attached to over explaining yourself, seeking permission, maybe avoiding visibility, what will happen is you will continually recreate those patterns even after you've been promoted. All right, friends. So let's talk about why leaders resist new identities. So again, what you can do is listen to see it like, if do I hear any version of myself in this? Here's the gig. The old identity feels safe. That's why people resist it. The current version of you got here, got you here. It created success. The current version has a long list of habits that they've created that ultimately led to the success that you're in now. This current version earned the respect of the peers, of the colleagues, and it became super familiar and comfortable. And so letting go of this identity can feel threatening, right? Like it can feel like a loss or like this sense of like you're losing self and you're losing authenticity. But we don't realize how we had to change and grow to even become this current self or to get to that level. So common hidden fears I sometimes hear are, you know, mention this one throughout. Who do you think you are? Or you've changed? Or do you think you're better than us? This fear of visibility, judgment, isolation, a lot of this can be rooted in how we were brought up. And maybe our family or cultural or friend dynamics. A lot of this is social conditioning and workplace culture, right? So all things that are very real. So again, very circumstantial about what we've experienced, but we have to question like why we believe what we believe. Again, a lot of times this was unconscious programming that we're not even fully aware of. And so some leaders have learned that maybe they want to be humble, but they believe that equates to invisibility. I hear this one a lot. I think some leaders think confidence, they don't want to be confused with being arrogant. And there's a very distinct difference between confidence and arrogance, and people struggle with that line. And some people think that ambition can be a negative. They think being ambitious equates to selfishness, and that drive is somehow an ambition is taking away from somebody else rather than just being driven for yourself. And there can be such a distinct difference between these two. And so the struggle here is that stepping fully into these leadership roles and capabilities creates this internal conflict with these past beliefs, with these past ingrained habits that we have. And so here's where we want to make this like leadership identity shift. The reality is we evolve identities throughout our entire life. We naturally transition from different seasons and phases of our lives, from being an infant, not taking care of ourselves at all, to a child, an adolescent teenager, to a college student being more independent, to maybe becoming again a manager and going into your career, to maybe being a spouse or significant other, to being a parent, and then even being a caretaker or a grandparent, right? There's all these different seasons where we shift identities. But for some reason, in leadership, in corporate sphere, we expect to stay psychologically identical while operating at a completely different level of responsibility. Doesn't work. Every new leadership level requires new thinking, new expectations and standards for ourselves, brand new boundaries, new emotional regulation. It's tougher, and a new self concept. This is why coaching can be so powerful to help through this. And I always say this, when you get to a certain level of being an executive, it's a completely different game. And it's less typically about the tactical, it's more about the mindset and the shifting and this identity work. So I'm going to give you some practical coaching tools. I love to give you some tactical stuff here, and we're going to go through a couple of steps here that you can do on your own. So step number one, you want to identify your current leadership identity. You can't change what you aren't aware of or you haven't acknowledged for yourself. So here's some questions that you can borrow and utilize in your own self-coaching. So questions like, what do I currently believe about success? What do I currently believe about powerful leaders? What feels comfortable for me about leveling up? Maybe about posting again that I'm a leader. Maybe about changing my signature line, owning the title. What am I afraid of what people are going to think? And what behaviors might I still be carrying from an older version of myself? Write all that down. You just want to be able to look at this, right? Getting it out of your head on a paper somewhere electronically, physically, so helpful to look at. The key line, here's what you want to think about. You need these GPS coordinates of your current mindset before you can lead yourself somewhere new. All right. That's what I want you to remember. I need my current status, my current what's it called? Longitude, latitude, where I'm at before we lead to this new identity. That's step one. Step two. Now you want to go to the future version of you. You want to name it. Who is the future version of this identity? Examples could be so simple as this is the CEO version of me. This is the boardroom, the board seat me. This is C-suite me. This is seven-figure me. This is home leader me. This is me as a visionary, as a strategic leader me, whatever. This creates intentionality. You're no longer accidentally evolving. You're consciously building and leaning into this new identity. So the leader I was talking about earlier that didn't want to put the C-suite title, like you got to lean into this title and go to C-suite version you. We got to own this and think about and feel what it feels like. And that's where we'll lead into step three. You want to spend time in this new future identity. It sounds a little like woo-woo and travel and chiming travel, and maybe it is, but this is where you strengthen the visualization piece. Now, if you ever study athletes, they use the visualization to their strengths and to their benefit in trying to visualize themselves winning. So high performers spend an enormous amount of energy planning strategic goals, but almost no time emotionally rehearsing the version of themselves required to hold those goals. So again, I'm going to give you some coaching questions you can borrow. Things like, how does this version of me make decisions? What do they tolerate? What do they no longer apologize for? How do they communicate? What rooms do they walk into confidently? How do they protect their time? What do they protect their time from? And what habits disappear? I love that one. Just what are we letting go of? And so you have to emotionally familiarize yourself with the next level before it ever feels natural and normal. It's like trying on a new piece of clothing and you're trying to check out how it feels before you take it home and pull the tags off. Okay, two more steps, friends. Step four. Now we're going to work on some new thoughts, what I call bridge thoughts. Why bridge? Here's the current version of you, new version of you. We're going to step across this bridge to get there. This is the strongest thought work tool you can use here, is because if you are currently you're thinking about yourself as a junior, whatever, non-CEO level, I'll say junior, but you're at a non-CEO level and you want to be at CEO me level, you're not going to just jump from I'm not really owning, I could be a CEO, I could never be a CEO, to jumping to I am an extraordinary CEO. It's just, well, some people can. More than likely, if you're listening, you're going to have some challenges around that step. You might need some help there, right? So what will happen is your brain's going to reject these thoughts that feel unbelievable. So what you're going to do instead, you're going to be using and creating believable bridge thoughts. What I mean by this is we're going to use thoughts as progression. And examples of this could look like I'm learning to lead at higher levels, period. I'm capable of strategic leadership. I belong in executive conversations. I'm becoming the kind of leader who can hold this role. Love that one because you're like acknowledging that you're in these steps. I am becoming the kind of leader who can hold this. Bridge thoughts reduce some of that like internal resistance that's like, no way could we possibly be there, while you're creating this forward momentum. Okay. Basically, it's like training wheels to get you to the big time thought that you're chasing. All right. Last step, friends. We're then going to, once we have that bridge thought, practice that identity daily. This is where the leadership embodiment happens. By embodiment, I mean, we're going to take that bridge thought, we're going to use some of those identity-based statements, and then we're going to own it. and we're going to use it. So things like my CEO self handles conflict directly, right? It's an action. My executive self protects strategic thinking time. My future self does not over-explain. My leadership identity does not shrink in important rooms, right? So by owning these thoughts before we go into these moments, then we can practice executive presence. And executive presence in this way is practiced long, long before it is perceived internally. So what I mean by that is we're going to use this and we're going to go to bat with this practice thought over and over and over again. And sometimes when we step up to bat, we hit a home run. Most of the time, we are going to not hit a home run. We might bunt. We might swing and miss, all that. We're going sports analogies, I guess, today. So when we step up and we practice this, we're building that muscle to embody that. We're practicing to see what it feels like and moving ourselves across those bridges. All right, friends. So those are the steps. And this work is so important, this embodiment work. I can't tell you and cannot stress enough to you why this work really matters. Here's the deal. Most leaders do not need more information. You have every piece of information at your fingertips. You don't need another degree or some sort of leadership certification. I had one leader tell me, like, I don't have time to go back and get an MBA. I'm like, that is not where you're going to learn to lead your team of people. You don't need another leadership book or podcast. What you have to work on is help closing this gap between who you currently are and then who you are trying to become as a leader. And as leaders, and again, high achieving leaders are typically my audience and my clients, that you're always trying to level up. You're not trying to stay stagnant. You're always working towards the next thing, even if you have arrived in these C-suite, high executive, high performing levels. And that's where a huge part of my coaching work will come in with executives, is to help them go to that next level faster, expanding capacity, normalizing their visibility, owning their authority, shifting their identity, and stepping fully into these higher levels of leadership without self-sabotaging themselves. Because the next level rarely requires a completely different person. However, it does require a different version of you. So, in closing, if you are feeling resistance to the next level right now, it doesn't mean that you're incapable. It just simply means that your identity hasn't fully caught up to your level of opportunity yet. So, friends, if this episode is resonating with you, send it to another leader who might be stepping into a bigger season professionally, or reach out if you want to talk more about it and maybe explore what this season could look like for you and if coaching might be a good fit to help you get there and level up. As always, you can get a hold of me through my website. It's always listed in my podcast show notes. It's Alicia Cowan Coaching. It's ELISIAKEOWN coaching.com. And again, it's always listed in the podcast show notes. You can easily get a hold of me, shoot me a quick note. We set up a call, talk through what you're experiencing, and it's a really no pressure environment where you see if it's a good fit for you or not. Easy as that. As always, friends, I am so appreciative for you being here, and I will see you next time on the Executive Coaching Podcast. Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Executive Coaching Podcast with Alicia Cowan. If you're ready to have an executive coach who's ready to help you lead your team to success, then book an introductory call at aliciacowancoaching.com/call.